The house had learned how to be quiet after she died, not the peaceful kind of quiet. No, this was a hollow stillness, the kind that pressed against the ears until even breathing felt too loud. Every sound echoed longer than it should have. Every memory lingered where it wasn't invited. I had stopped turning on the radio in the mornings because she used to hum along while making coffee, always off key, always smiling at me like she knew and didn't care. Grief does that. It turns ordinary habits into landmines. Of everything she left behind, I kept only one thing close. Just one, her necklace. It was simple at first glance, a thin gold chain with a small oval medallion resting at its center. Nothing flashy, nothing that would catch a stranger's eye, but I knew its weight better than I knew my own pulse. I remember the day I gave it to her, how she laughed and said it was too much, how she wore it anyway and never once took it off after that. She wore it through everything, through sickness, through exhaustion, through the quiet nights when fear crept between us, and neither of us wanted to say it out loud. When the doctors spoke in gentle voices and avoided my eyes, that necklace lay against her collarbone like a promise refusing to break. On her last day, when her hand trembled in mine, my fingers brushed the chain. It was warm, still alive with her. After the funeral, when the casseroles stopped coming and the phone stopped ringing, I found the necklace folded carefully inside her jewelry box. I closed my hand around it and felt something inside me crack, but not all the way. That peace stayed intact because of it. It became my anchor. Every morning I would take it out and sit at the edge of the bed, letting it rest in my palm. Sometimes I talked to it. I told it about the weather, about how the roses she planted were still blooming, about how our daughter barely came around anymore. I never wore it. It wasn't mine to wear. It was mine to keep until the day it wasn't there. At first, I assumed I'd misplaced it. Grief makes you careless. I checked the drawer twice, then a third time. I pulled out socks, old receipts, a watch I hadn't worn since, before she got sick. Nothing. My chest tightened. I searched the house slowly, methodically, as if moving too fast might break something else I couldn't afford to lose. I checked the bathroom cabinet, the nightstand, and the coat pockets. I even looked inside the freezer, remembering a ridiculous moment years ago when she'd hidden her ring there to teach me a lesson. About paying attention, I laughed at the memory, then I stopped laughing. Panic has a way of creeping in quietly. It doesn't announce itself. It whispers. It tells you that you're being dramatic, that it will turn up, that you've survived worse. And then, suddenly, your hands are shaking, and you're sitting on the floor, surrounded by drawers that no longer feel familiar. The necklace was gone. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room with the lights off, staring at the place on the wall where our wedding photo still hung. She was smiling in it, head tilted slightly, the necklace catching the light. I realized with a sick twist in my stomach that I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen it clearly. Days, weeks, had I trusted the world too much with the last thing that mattered. In the morning, I asked my daughter if she'd seen it. She didn't look up from her phone right away, and in that pause, just that brief hesitation, I felt something shift. Like the floor beneath my feet had decided not to hold anymore. I didn't know it then, but the weight I'd been carrying all these months was about to change. Not because it was lifted, but because it was about to fall. She finally looked up, not with concern, not with confusion, just mild annoyance, like I'd interrupted something important. Her fingers kept moving across the screen, nails clicking softly, rhythmically, too calm for the question I'd asked. The necklace, she repeated, as if searching her memory for something trivial. Oh, yeah, I sold it. The words landed wrong. They didn't sink in. They hovered between us, unreal and weightless, like smoke you could wave away. You what? I said. She sighed and leaned back in the chair, rolling her eyes in a way that felt disturbingly familiar. I'd seen that expression before on her mother, usually right before laughter followed, but here there was no warmth behind it. Only impatience. I sold it, she said again, slower this time, as if I were the one struggling to keep up. I needed the money. For a moment my mind scrambled to protect me. Asterisk borrowed asterisk, it suggested. Asterisk moved for safekeeping asterisk. Asterisk planning to surprise you. Asterisk, but her tone had already stripped those possibilities bare. You sold your mother's necklace, I said, each word measured, careful, like stepping across broken glass. She shrugged. I needed it for a vacation. Flights are expensive, Dad, you know that. Vacation. The room seemed to tilt slightly, like the house itself had lost its balance. I reached for the back of the couch, steadying myself, suddenly unsure when standing had become such a difficult task. That necklace? I began, then stopped. My throat closed around the rest of the sentence. Asterisk, that necklace was your mother's heartbeat. That necklace was all I had left. Asterisk, none of it came out. She glanced at me then, really looked at me, and something like irritation crossed her face. Don't start, she said. It was just jewelry. You're acting like I sold the house. Just jewelry, I laughed. I didn't mean to. It came out sharp and hollow, a sound that didn't belong to me. You think I kept it locked away all this time because it was worth money. She stood up, defensive now. You're always like this, living in the past. Mom's gone, Dad. You need to move on. Move on. I wanted to ask her when she'd decided grief had an expiration date. I wanted to ask her how long love was supposed to last once someone stopped breathing. Instead, I looked at her and saw a stranger wearing my child's face. When did you sell it? I asked. A couple weeks ago, she said. Look, I didn't think you'd even notice. You never wear it. It was just sitting there. Just sitting there. I felt something inside me break, not loudly, not all at once, but in a way that couldn't be repaired. I'd raised her, taught her how to ride a bike, how to say please and thank you, how to sit quietly beside her mother in hospital rooms. Somewhere along the way I had failed to teach her the weight of memory. You didn't ask, I said softly. She hesitated, just a fraction. Then, I didn't think I had to. That was when the anger came, not the shouting kind. The cold, heavy kind that settles deep in your chest and refuses to leave. But beneath it, worse than anger, was disappointment. Crushing and absolute. Where did you sell it? I asked. She named the pawn shop like she was reciting a grocery list. No shame, no apology, just convenience. I'll get it back. I said more to myself than to her. She laughed. Good luck. Once it's sold, it's sold. I turned away then, because if I stayed, I would have said something unforgivable. I went into the bedroom and closed the door behind me. The silence rushed back in, thicker than before. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the empty jewelry box. Blood, I realized, does not always mean loyalty. Sometimes it only means proximity. With shaking hands, I picked up my phone and dialed the number she'd given me. I had no idea that the call I was about to make would change everything I thought I knew, not just about the necklace, but about the woman I'd loved and the daughter I no longer recognized. The pawn shop answered on the third ring, Marrow and Sons. A man said, his voice steady, practiced. How can I help you? I swallowed. My mouth felt dry, like I'd been breathing dust. I'm calling about a necklace. I said, gold chain, oval medallion. It was sold to you recently. There was a pause. I heard papers shifting, a keyboard tapping. Do you have a receipt number? No, I said. It belonged to my late wife. Another pause, longer this time. What was her name? He asked gently. I told him. Something changed on the line. The air between us felt different, heavier, as if he had straightened in his chair. Yes, he said quietly. I remember it. My heart lurched. You still have it. Yes, sir, we do. Relief flooded me so suddenly my knees nearly gave out. I sat down hard in the chair by the window. I'll come today. I'll pay whatever, sir, he interrupted. Before you do, there's something you should know. I closed my eyes. What kind of something? He exhaled slowly. When we appraise jewelry, we inspect it carefully. The pendant, well, it opened. I frowned, opened. Yes, sir, the medallion. I stared at the wall across from me, my reflection faint in the glass. I didn't know it opened, neither did the young woman who sold it. He said, she was very certain it was just decorative. My pulse thundered in my ears. What was inside? There was a hesitation, the kind that carries respect. We found a folded letter, handwritten, and something else for legal reasons. He continued, we didn't read the letter, but when it fell open, we saw the name on the inside of the medallion, yours. The room spun. I pressed my palm against my chest, suddenly aware of how fast my heart was beating, how close it felt to something breaking. My wife never said anything. I whispered, some people don't. He replied softly, some people prepare quietly. I drove to the shop in a fog, memories blurring together. Every mile felt like peeling back time. Her smile, her silences, the moments I'd mistaken for nothing. How many secrets had she carried without burdening me? The shop smelled of old wood and metal. The man behind the counter was older than I'd expected, gray-haired, eyes kind but sharp. He recognized me immediately. She loved that necklace, he said, handing it over carefully, like something sacred. My hands trembled as I took it. Up close, I saw it, the nearly invisible seam along the edge of the medallion. How had I missed it all these years? My thumb brushed against the back, and with the slightest pressure, it clicked open. Inside was a folded piece of paper, edges softened with age. I didn't open it right away. I wasn't ready. There was also this, the man said, sliding a small envelope across the counter. It was tucked behind the letter. I looked at him, confused. It's a deposit slip, he explained, dated 3 years ago, a trust account, in your wife's name and your daughter's. My breath caught. She came in once, he added, voice low, not to sell it, just to ask questions. She wanted to make sure that if it ever came to this, the truth would come out. The truth. I left the shop clutching the necklace, my world rearranging itself with every step. In my car, I finally opened the letter. My wife's handwriting greeted me slanted slightly to the right, familiar as her voice in my head. Asterisk, if you are reading this, asterisk it began, asterisk, then I was right to trust you with this weight. Asterisk tears blurred the words, but I kept reading. She wrote about love and loss, about knowing our daughter would struggle with money and impulse, about hoping she'd grow, but preparing in case she didn't. She wrote about how some lessons could not be taught with words, only with consequence. At the bottom, one final line stood alone, underlined twice. Asterisk, do not rush to anger. Let the truth teach her what I could not. Asterisk, I closed the medallion and pressed it to my chest. For the first time since her death, I didn't feel alone. She was still guiding us, and now, so was the necklace. I didn't tell my daughter right away. That was the first choice I made that felt entirely my own since my wife's death. Not driven by fear, not by grief, but by clarity. Her words echoed in my mind, asterisk, do not rush to anger. Let the truth teach her what I could not. Asterisk, so I stayed quiet. I placed the necklace back in its box, but this time I didn't lock it away. I left it exactly where it belonged on the dresser in plain sight. Some things don't need hiding. Some things need to be seen when the time is right. My daughter left for her vacation 2 days later. She posted photos, online sunsets, drinks with tiny umbrellas, her smiling face tilted toward the camera. People commented with hearts and envy. I looked at those photos late at night, not with bitterness, but with a strange calm. She thought she'd won something. She thought she'd escaped consequence. She hadn't. The first crack came quietly. She called me on the 3rd day, her voice tight, irritated. Dad, did Mom ever mention a trust fund? I closed my eyes. No, I said simply. Well, the bank froze my card, she snapped. They said there was some kind of account issue. Do you know how embarrassing that is? I thought of my wife sitting at the kitchen table years ago. Papers spread neatly in front of her, her face thoughtful. Not angry, not disappointed. Just prepared. I'm sure it will sort itself out. I said. It didn't. By the end of the week, the vacation had soured. She had to borrow money from friends, cut the trip short, come home early, the photos stopped, the phone calls grew quieter. When she finally stood in the doorway of the house again, she looked smaller somehow, tired, less certain of herself. That was when I asked her to sit down. I placed the necklace between us on the table. Her eyes widened. "How did you—" "It was never gone," I said gently, not really. She reached for it, then hesitated, like it might burn her. "I went to the pawn shop," I continued. "They told me something you didn't know. Something asterisk I asterisk didn't know either." I opened the medallion. Her breath caught as the letter slipped into view. I handed it to her without a word. She read it slowly. Once, then again, her hands began to shake. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I know." I said, "That's the point." I told her about the trust. About how her mother had set it up with conditions, not punishment, not control, but care. It was meant for stability, for growth, and it could only be accessed if certain values were honored: respect, responsibility, memory. She covered her mouth, tears spilling freely now. "I sold it," she said like a confession. "I sold asterisk her asterisk." "No," I replied softly. "You sold a necklace." She looked up at me, eyes red. "Then why does it feel like this?" "Because love isn't measured in gold," I thought. "It's measured in what you refuse to trade." "I'm not angry," I said, and it was true, "but I am disappointed. And your mother, she trusted you to learn." We sat in silence for a long time. In the end, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't demand apologies. I didn't take anything from her. The consequence had already done its work. Later that night, after she went to bed, I held the necklace once more. I felt its weight, not heavy now, but steady, familiar, whole. Love, I realized, doesn't always protect us from pain. Sometimes it teaches through it. I closed the medallion and placed it back in the box, smiling faintly for the first time in months. She had never really left us. She had simply chosen the perfect moment to speak.